Hello, well met. This is founder Laerun with Fantasy Grounds College. I am going to do a demonstration of token locking. Previously, we've done 2 or 3 videos with token locking. There's been a lot of confusion about it. I want to use this videos to help clarify some of that. I apologize, there's been a lot of changes to that since Unity's been released. So this is with the latest and greatest version of Fantasy Grounds Unity. It is the 12th of November, 2020. In case you're watching this in the future. I want to make sure that you understand a couple things before we get into that. So first of all, always want to make sure that your grid is on your map, which this map does have a grid. And if you are the game master, you can adjust the color. So if you don't like this gray color and you want it to stand out more, I'm going to go to the grid option, which is up here in the top right of the map options for the tools. And you can recolor by using the color picker. So I'm going to go ahead and just change it a little bit so I can see it a little bit better. And then you can fade the alpha, which is the transparency, so it's not so bright. And that should clean that up a little bit. So now we have a nicer looking grid that's a little bit more visible and not so obnoxious. So again, I went to the grid area and I just changed the color and it's on now. Now you can also turn the grid off. It'll still have the grid, but it won't be visible. So I'm going to go ahead and lock this again. I don't need to mess with it. And when you're using tokens and such, and you want to see how they're moving and such, even before your game, you want to make sure you're in play mode. If you're in one of these other modes, it's probably not going to emulate this very well. So you have to be careful with that. So go ahead and lock this. Now, if you're using a Mac, I'm not sure what the keys are going to be, but I'm sure they can be remapped. So I apologize if you're using a Mac. I don't know exactly what the command keys are because the shortcuts might be a little different, but I am almost positive they can be remapped. So whatever version of Mac you're using or emulator, I apologize. So now I have a party on the map. This is a group of 5. They're all 3rd level. I have Fig and Fetch, Alden, he's a bard, Figgins a rogue. Damia is a tiefling sorceress or warlock. Hiena Rockfist is a dwarven cleric, and Dorag Rockfist, her brother, is a dwarven fighter. So they're all lined up at this doorway trying to get in, and they're not sure how they're going to get in. The door is locked. It's pouring down rain outside, and they all received a message to attend a party or some sort of celebration, and it doesn't look like anyone's home, so they're a little bit confused. So they're sitting at the door right now. Figgin is thinking about picking the lock because he wants to get in and see what's going on there, but he's kind of spooked out. Even though halflings are not normally afraid, he's a little bit, I would say, nervous. I wouldn't say afraid, but he's definitely concerned about what's happening beyond these doors. So he's looking back at his group for approval because he's like, well, do you want me to unlock the door or not? And they're like, yeah. You know, like Alden, he says, well, unlock the door or not, we have to get in. Dorag says,
come on, you little pipsqueak, don't make me thump you on the head. Let's get that door open, or I'll bash it in.
And Hiena says,
yeah, why don't you open that door before I crown you with my mace?
And Damia says,
go ahead, I mean, there's no one better. I don't see any windows that I can look into, otherwise I can just misty step into this godforsaken hellhole.
So I'm going to demonstrate the token locking and some of the prerequisites that you need to do before you run an encounter like this. So first of all the characters need to be on the combat tracker along with the enemies. Now this group does not know that there's a group of ghoul and 3 skeletons. Now with these already being checked, that means that they are already located on the map. And I'm going to hit the down arrow, which sets them over into the combat tracker. So once they are there, now they are part of this encounter. So now I have these undead, and they're all set to go. They're a little bit off on the squares, so I'll make sure you want to make sure that all your NPCs and your characters are basically on a square. And it looks like the party members are. So it must have been I made an adjustment and they moved. So there we go. There is our group. So the undead are not visible by default. That is built in. That's by design. Only the game master can see them. Also on the combat tracker. So you don't need to worry about that. And they're ready to go. So whenever they come through that door, the undead will be waiting for them. I'm going to right click on this doorway here, or in this area by the doorway, and not on a token, but anywhere on the map. So if I right click on the map, I am going to click lock token. So this is how you enable the token locking. So once I do that, what that does is it prevents the party members from just moving anywhere. And if they do move, it creates a movement line in which I can approve it. So the only time you really need to have this on, technically, is when you're fighting or when there's an intricate pathway they have to take or something like that. Usually I'll leave it unlocked for them if they're just role-playing. If I had the line of sight completely set up on here, this door would be locked and they wouldn't be able to see past a lot of these walls and such. But for now, I just want to demonstrate the token locking. That's the most important aspect of this. So right now, they want to move through here. I told them there's a locked door. It's a double door. So Figgin is going to try to unlock this door. The door has a 13 DC or a difficulty challenge rating of 13. So he has to roll a 13 or higher to get past this door. If I click on his token and I bring up his character sheet, it's right here on the left, and I go to his skills tab, he has a pretty good sleight of hand. It's +5 on his bonus, and he's proficient. So I'm going to go ahead and roll this in the dice tower. In this case, the dice tower is a gargoyle looking thing. By the way, if you haven't seen this theme yet, this is the horror theme. It's part of Fantasy Grounds now. Josh Watmo made it, and it looks pretty slick. He's updated it and everything. I have a few suggestions for him, but it looks pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and take this roll here, and all I have to do is beat 13 or higher to pick the lock. So he's going to use his Steve's tools instead of his sleight of hand, because he has a pair of them. And I'm going to drag and drop that into the dice tower, and if he rolls a 13 or higher, he can get through the doors without making a bunch of noise. So I'm going to go ahead and roll. So just drag and drop this in here. And he rolled a 19, so that'll do it. So his roll made it. Basically, click, he unlocks this, and everyone looks relieved. They're like, thank God. So he says, should I open the door? And they're like, well, you might as well. You're up there. Doric says,
Before you open that, let me come up with you.
So Doric wants to move here to here. In order to emulate a character's movement, if I just pick it up and drag it, it's just going to move anywhere I want it to, because I'm the host, I'm the game master. If I want to emulate the movement, I have to hold the Alt key. So this is new from Classic, and it's new to Fantasy Grounds Unity. It used to be that Classic was the only way you could do something like this, and it was a little different. And then Unity, they turned this off for a long time until they got everything situated. And then in the last few weeks, they've actually implemented this. So when we created the videos before, it was showing different things, and we didn't even have token locking until like probably the 5th or 6th episode. So hopefully this clarifies that. So again, you right click to lock the tokens, and then when you are the game master and you're moving pieces around the table, if you want to emulate character movement or you want to track your NPC movements, you need to hold down the Alt key. It used to be Control. I have a very bad habit of saying Control because that's what it's been for I don't know how many years, so I have to deprogram myself. But it is the Alt key that creates this movement. Now, players don't have to hold down the Alt key. They can move their token and it will not, they don't have to do that. Only the game master has to. So in this case, he went ahead and moved. They're not in an initiative order, but I still want to keep track of his movement. So once he's moved there and he's not moving through any of his allies or anything like that, I will hit this check button and that will approve it. So he's moved up to there. So now their action will be to open this door. So Figgin, technically, if he uses this turn, he's going to be opening the door. Well, the undead don't know they're there yet. So what I'm going to do is, since he's got this stealth roll and he wants to do it quietly, I'm going to let him roll a stealth check. If he beats the passive perception of this undead group, then it will be quiet enough to where they don't get ambushed or nobody's surprised in this case. So I'm going to go ahead and roll for that. Basically, he's announcing that he's going to be very quiet. Everyone's kind of waiting to see what happens. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up Figgin's sheet again. This time I'm going to roll Stealth, which is a +7. And most of the passive perception on the undead shouldn't be that powerful. So like this, passive perception is like 8 or 9. And then on the ghoul, it's 9 as well. So they're not really as perceptive or waiting for anyone in particular. They're just kind of average. So he's going to roll, and let's see what happens. So I think the only way he's really going to fail is if he rolls a 1 or a 2. So he's going to unlock the door and push it open very quietly and try to be as quiet as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and roll his stealth. And he rolled a total of 13, so that actually beats their passive perception. They don't know he's there yet. So he's going to sneak in the door, and when you sneak in 5th edition, you can only move half your movement rate. Well, since he's a halfling and is about 25 feet, so I'm going to say he can only move 10 feet since he opened the door and everything. So he can move 2 squares inside if he wishes to. So he's going to say, yes, I want to move in. So he's stealthily opened the door, kind of cracked it open, and he's moving in, and he's going to move in 10 feet. If I just move it, it's not going to make that line. So I have to use the Alt key. And as you can see, if you hold down the mouse key, or the Alt key, I should say, it will just make a line. If you hold it down, let it go, and then continue, it will make these waypoints. So a waypoint is adjustable, so if you had to move here or something like that, you can. So this is how he wanted to move, it's like this. So I'll go ahead and approve it, because that's not too much cutting through the door. So I go ahead and approve it, and he'll stay right there. And he sees this skeleton standing there. So he's like excited. He's like, oh boy. So he pulls out his missile weapon and he says he's going to ready his action. So he went through the door, he did his movement. So his action or his ready action is if any of these guys move, if this guy or this guy moves, so he's waiting to see what happens. So he's holding his action. And he's stealthy right now. And the skeletons actually don't know he's there. So this skeleton here, number 2, I'm going to make him visible now, since he's no longer behind the door or he's not hiding behind anything. And the skeleton here on the staircase also is visible. So that is going to be here. And Figgin can see this guy here. Because if you target this guy or if you draw a line, there's nothing blocking his vision. The only thing you can't see probably is this ghoul. So I'm going to go ahead and make skeleton number 1 visible. And the only bad thing about this is I don't have line of sight on, so the other players can see these as well. So if I had line of sight and I had party vision taken off, they would not be able to tell that where these skeletons were. Well, he could say something like, hey, there's some problems here, but then he alerts the skeleton. So he's going to remain quiet, and he's going to be in position. He's basically waiting his turn. And that's the first action, since these guys can fairly be considered surprised. So now it's good old Doric. He's pretty noisy. He's not known for being quiet. As a matter of fact, he has some armor that's pretty noisy. So if you go to his skills and you look at his stealth, it's not very great. I mean, it's not bad, but he has armor on that will probably make it disadvantage. So I'm going to go ahead and roll stealth for him, even though it's not his forte. So all he has to do is beat a 9. I mean, it shouldn't be too bad. We'll see. So I'm going to go ahead and drag and drop this in. He's trying to sneak inside as well. He's trying to be as quiet as possible. Take stealth. And he did roll at disadvantage. Ah, see? It rolled an 8 total. He walked in. He got all the way. He can only move half his movement rate. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Alt and move him. That's about as far as he got. And as soon as he got through that doorway, he went squeak. So he got he basically alerted all these undead. So that basically starts the round because he's basically got all of these guys in a... Now what I'm going to do is roll initiative. So I'm going to hit menu, initiative. But technically this is kind of like a surprise round, so maybe I'll just re-roll everybody. So I'll go ahead and do that. So I'm going to roll for everybody. Okay, so now that I've re-rolled, Damia is the sorceress, gets the first turn. So if I go to her sheet, I'm going to first put on her hellish resistance because that's part of her racial abilities. And she has some spells that she can use at her disposal. So I think that she's going to cast Blade Ward. So what that'll do is protect her from piercing and bludgeoning and slashing weapons. So this is a spell that she can cast on herself. So if I click on this, it puts a resistance on her. And she's going to move up to the doorway, but she's not going to go in. So I'm going to hold down the Alt key, stop right there, prepare to defend herself. Now the doors are open now, so we can assume there's no barrier here. So that is her turn, and she's not going to attack because she already cast a spell. So you come back to the tracker and you hit the down arrow for the next actor. This skeleton in the lobby over here has a short bow and a short blade. So he's going to take out his short bow and he's going to target Doric. So to target, you just hold down the right control key. First, click on your token, and then hold down the right control key and target. So now you know it's 30 feet away, there's no objects in the way. There's a couple carpets here, but those are on the floor. So you have nothing in the way right now. So he's going to go ahead and double click up here, which is going to cast the attack roll. And that was a miss. So he must be wearing some pretty good armor. So that arrow must have either bounced off his shield or it just flew over his shoulder and almost hit Damien. So that was the skeleton's turn. And the skeleton is actually going to move forward. In order to emulate that, I have to hold the Alt key. So that triggers a movement when I hold the Alt key, but then I can continue for the rest of his movement. So if he has 25 and he's able to do that without getting an attack of opportunity, I can approve it and it'll go like this. However, if something's in the way or if something moves in his way, then we can always move the waypoints wherever we need to. But it keeps track of the total movement, so you got to be careful with that. So if he moves more than what he's supposed to, this final number will indicate it. So if I approve that, he'll move into his position. So that's all I really had to say about token locking. I didn't want to get into a big combat tutorial, but I wanted to show you a little bit of the context of where that would come into play. So hopefully this clarifies some things. I apologize for some of the earlier videos. They're pretty confusing. We had changes happening with Unity as we were building those videos. So hopefully this clears some things up. Thanks everybody. Happy gaming and see you around in the community. Bye-bye.